be divided into communities. It's impossible to do that. If you talk about what will happen in the region as more important than what happens today for the people of Syria, it means you don't really care about the people of Syria. Our top concern should be the people of Syria today. Once we address these things, we address them today, not in 1 year, not 10,000 people later. If we address these things today, together, collectively, in the interests of the people of Syria, not its neighbors or its friends or its foes, in the interest of these people who are there, only then can we succeed. And this is the main question for me. How do we all put our efforts together in Bulgaria, in Qatar, in other parts of the world, in the Arab world, in the Arab League, in the European Union, in looking at what the future of Syria is, and helping our friends in the opposition design that future. Not by telling them how they should do their, how they should design their country, but telling them how we have designed ours, so that they can reach out to their people in a common vision. Now, how difficult is that?
The most important question now is to what extent, how long the regimes of Assad can hang on. Now we go for a break, and when we come back, we'll hear the answer from you. So please stay with us.
Are we doing okay for the time? Good.
I let you speak because you explain a good vision for people to understand a lot of things.
No problem.
It's normally my interview, but people should understand.
Stand by, Your Excellency. We are almost back. Yes, we are. So we are on air now. Stand by. Welcome back to the program with the Foreign Minister of Bulgaria, Nikolai Miladinov. We interview him about the situation in Syria and the countries in the Middle East. How long do you think the regime of Assad can hang on?
If I had an answer to that question, I would probably be a millionaire. I think our responsibility today must be in the immediate stopping of the violence. Probably, if you had asked me this question 3 months ago or 6 months ago, I would have said that the most immediate task is the political process. But when we see that in one day cities like Idlib are run over by the security forces, that hundreds of people have, die in a single day, our primary focus must be to stop the violence and then proceed with the political process. If the violence is not stopped, as I said earlier, there is a risk that the very fabric of Syrian society will be destroyed. So I place a lot of trust right now. This will probably not gain me much popularity, but I put a lot of trust and hope in what one of the most skilled diplomats in the world, Kofi Annan, is now trying to do. I hope, I pray that he succeeds. Because if he does not, it will be much more difficult to repair Syria after the end of the regime.
But everybody is saying that the mission of Annan, is it just about giving the regime more time in order to do more killing? It's just buying time.
Unfortunately, what we have seen is that as this mission has unfolded, more people have been killed. But it is an effort, it is a very serious effort to find an end to the violence. What we must do today is to help Kofi Annan in understanding how he can achieve that stop in the violence and go back to what was the plan of the Arab League for the transition in Syria. Not come up with new plans, not design new ideas, but go back to that on which there is agreement in the Arab world. What meanwhile we in Europe need to do.
But if the regime refuses it, what value do you attach to it? What value do you attach to the Arab League plan if this is refused by a regime?
I think we still have very important instruments, as I said in the beginning, including sanctions, including political pressure through the United Nations in the General Assembly, as was the case recently, in other bodies, to increase the political pressure on the regime, to understand that they have to abide by this plan. I know that this is, somebody will say, how many people need to die more before you intervene?
Yes.
But as I said in the beginning, for us and for the international community, what will be one of the most important decisions, one of the most important, not decisions, but processes, would be to see a clear vision for the future of Syria beyond Assad. To strengthen the sanctions, not just in Europe, to strengthen the sanctions in the Arab world, to deny the ability of the regime to buy the weapons that it has, to work with countries like Russia, to work with countries like China, in convincing them that they gain nothing by supporting this regime. Not today, not in the future, not in the Middle East, not anywhere. And I think if we do this in a concerted manner, together, firmly, we will all come to the right decisions. And we will take inevitably the right decisions that need to be taken to help the people of Syria.
Please answer me frankly. Israel is piling pressure on Europe and the international community so that they do not act against the regime of Syria, because that regime is protecting Israel and the borders with it. So Israel is afraid that it will be in the future be besieged by Islamist regimes in Syria, Egypt and Jordan. So Israel is preventing the regime of Syria to fall and is working hard to achieve that.
That's a good excuse. you know, if you take that line, if you take that explanation, or if, as some others say, that this is not about the regime in Syria, this is about Iran, this is an excuse, or Iran or Israel, this is an excuse not to do anything in Syria. This is about Syria. It's about the people of Syria. And I think one sees, even today, for example, the Israeli foreign minister wrote an interesting article today in which he admits that it is in the interest of his country to see democracy in the Middle East. It's a very careful argument. And I know that many people believe that this is not true. But I believe very
for
firmly...
consumption, just for consumption.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
It is just for consumption. The position of the Israeli foreign minister differs from the other Israelis, especially when it comes to Syria. It's just for public consumption, no more.
Again, you know, this is a good excuse. I firmly believe, and everyone in Europe is absolutely convinced, that there is no better guarantee for peace and for security in the Middle East, whether it's the security of Syria, whether that's the security of a Palestinian state, of any other, of Egypt, of any other country, of Israel as well, than accountable government. It may be noisy, it may be difficult, it may be sometimes treacherous, but this is the best guarantee, because what the Arab awakening has proven is that if you base your security on corrupt and non-accountable dictators, your security is not worth much, that this is a temporary solution. It has proven that people in the Arab world, Muslims, Christians, Arabs, have every right to live in a democratic country, just like everyone else. And it has proven that people have dignity. And when they stand and defend their dignity, you have to account for that. You have to recognize it. And I go back to your question. This is about Syria. This is not about Israel. This is not about Iran. This is not about great powers. This is about the people of Syria. If we start getting into an analytical discussion, a philosophical dialogue, we can have nice tea, sit outside, and talk for as long as we want. But people will continue to die in Syria. We need to bring this discussion back on the right track. It is about Syria, it is about a dictator, it is about democracy, and it is about a vision for the future.
How can the opposition in Syria to play a very effective role, especially about defection that happened today and differences that are clear between its different members, and that all parties are calling on it to be unified?
Let's remember that we're talking about opposition to one of the most radical regimes in the region. An opposition that includes people from very different political backgrounds, some of whom are outside of Syria, some of whom...
Maybe that's like 40 years back.
Some of whom are actually inside Syria and have to survive every single day. And we are very easily critical of this opposition. Now, I have never seen any opposition movement, any revolutionary opposition movement, that is as democratic and as open as the opposition in Syria. Talking about their differences on TV in the middle of a revolution, many people will find this very strange. Definitely it's not very practical. But as somebody recently said, when your voice has been, when you have not been allowed to speak for so long, everyone wants to hear their voice and everyone has an opinion. And this is where we in the international community must come in, to take all of these people in the Syrian opposition who have different opinions inside Syria and outside of Syria, and help them design their own future. They don't need now to divide who will be minister of what. What they need to do is agree on the principles on which the future of Syria will be managed. This is not about today writing down the members of the next government or parliament. It's about agreeing what rights will be protected, how government will be accountable, and how people will participate in it. When this is done, those people in Syria who are now struggling will identify with it. Those people outside of Syria will identify with it, and it will get the international support. And neighboring countries, particularly countries that have gone through transition, who have moved from dictatorship to democracy, have a lot to offer, have a lot of experience, lessons learned, things we can say that they shouldn't do, things that we can say they should do. Because our countries, my country for example, Bulgaria and others like it, have themselves experienced what it means from somebody from the outside to come and to help your opposition to be organized, to be more effective, to be more innovative, to learn how to deal with a democracy. And I think this makes us quite unique in what we can do and how we can help our friends in Syria in particular, but also across the region.
How do you see scenarios going forward for the Syrian regime, especially in light of the current circumstances? What scenario is possible going forward?
I think the Syrian regime must understand that the mission of Kofi Annan is the last attempt, the last serious attempt to discuss and to design a plan which allows for transition to happen. I think they must understand that the responsibility for the crimes that have happened in Syria will be clearly identified. It may not be identified today, but it will definitely be identified tomorrow. And people will be held accountable for those crimes. And they must understand that despite the differences that everyone has between the government and the opposition, they have a joint interest in keeping the fabric of Syrian society together. And it is no longer a matter of whether one person remains leader or another person replaces them. It is a matter of the people of Syria, in government, in opposition, those who haven't taken a side, those who haven't decided where they are, those who live outside and those who live inside, Arabs and Kurds, Alawite, Sunni, Christians, everyone, to stop and to realize that their country is being destroyed by violence, and it will be very difficult to repair it afterwards. If we start from this, and if we start from this understanding, It will be possible to stop the violence. It will be possible to have a dialogue that designs a transition process. And from, an outsider today in isolation, Syria can become an inspiring example of how you resolve these differences after the violence.
I don't like to wrap up without talking about democratic transition in your country. 20 years took you to move from dictatorship to democratic system, and now in Libya, Tunis, Egypt, and maybe in Yemen, or maybe in the future in Syria and other Arab countries, a similar transition from dictatorships to democracy. What can Bulgaria offer to these countries, Egypt, Tunis, and others, in terms of democratic transition?
When change came to Egypt, a few people found specific parallels. For example, has a revolution when did the Egyptian revolution take place? When President Mubarak was ousted, or a few weeks after that with the protests? The sudden disappearance of archives of the former security services. These parallels exist in our own history. But there is one parallel which everyone forgot. In the early days after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of communism, there were many people going around and saying publicly that Slavic countries cannot have democracy because historically they prefer dictatorship. That Orthodox Christians cannot live in a market economy because for some reason they are not capable of doing it. Very quickly all of these talking heads were proven wrong. What we can help, where we can help, is by telling our friends in the Arab world that yes, you can do it. It will be difficult, it will be painful, you will make a lot of mistakes, but you can do it. There is nothing wrong, and there is nothing wrong in being a Muslim who wants to live in a democratic country, and there is no reason why this cannot happen. We can help people prove this wrong. But what is most importantly is we can tell them how we did things, where we went wrong and what we did right, what we did too quickly and what we did too slowly, how we handled our own heritage, the history of our own regime, how we addressed issues of transitional justice. We can tell them that, yes, political reforms seem very important, and they are. They're crucially important, building political parties in a democratic system. But it is 1,000,000 times more difficult to build a social security system and a healthcare system that serves your people. And when societies in Tunisia, in Egypt and elsewhere get to the point at which they begin discussing their own healthcare, their own social security systems, their democratic transition from today will look like a very simple task. We have a lot of lessons, we have a lot of experience, and we put it on the table. If anyone wants to take it, they are welcome to do it. This is our lesson.
So, maybe we need to have an episode about democratic transition and how the Arab world can draw upon it. especially Egypt, Tunisia, and Libya. This question of security in particular and the relationship between police and people, this complex relationship between security and people. Could you just briefly talk to us how you overcome this problem?
For us it was a twofold problem. How do you dismantle the security apparatus of the regime, which held people in fear, without undermining the normal work that any security apparatus has to do?